there's a big contrast between the design of Karoth and the design of Aru. So far, everybody has seen Karoth, and they think that that is like the theme of our game, and it is. There are so many different themes that we have in store, and with Aru, it very much touches on a much more natural, aggressive feel. The Aru don't come from the same planet that Karoth does, and so you're going to have these very, very major influences on their design that will differentiate them quite a bit, and we're very excited to show that off. We have an amazing art team, and each member brings their own flavor to each design. One of the things that I really enjoyed about designing the Mass Hunter was that it held this really big bow that indicated, this is its tool. This is the weapon that it uses on the hunts for its prey, and also to carry out Lakulathon and Mala's will. The first two Immortals we're going to be showing for Aru are Mala and Zol. Mala is this kind of priestess, but also mother figure a little bit for the Aru. The Aru is a matriarchal society, and she sits atop of it, kind of high on the drug that is Lakulathon. Mala's defining features are definitely her beautiful kind of like plants that are going to be coming out, these flowers, and she looks a little bit like a living garden. Zol is my favorite. Zol is a huntress, and she has these huge horns that go back from her ceremonial helmet that she wears, and she has this long, almost living hair that is made out of this, like plant material that all Aru naturally grow. Zol is really interesting because she is one of the first Aru that was naturally born. Most of the Aru, 200 years prior to the game's launch setting, broke away from the Iratech and slowly kind of formed into what they are now. When tying in the Aru design to their environment, it is a little tricky, but once we became familiar with kind of the world as we built it and the environment as we began to design that space, it became really fun. So the world of Nuoth is this dense jungle, and pretty much it's not all just forest and stuff, but it's like every environment to the extreme. It's nature gone rampant. And so the things that live in this world consist, some of those shapes and some of the materials and stuff account for that environment. And we looked at some different plant life that currently exists in some of the extreme areas of the world, and other buildings and things that have really withstood the test of time, to see what kind of things would you see if you were to be on Nuoth and see the Aru environment in person.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the video game. Looks like we are live. Looks like we've got the sound going and everything is fine. DT Rage, Carlo 4, Cal Yao, and of course we've got Mr. Hyderlisk in the chat. My name is Tom. I do user experience and user interface design, especially hotkeys. Love hotkeys. They're my favorite thing. With us, we've got Dylan, Master of Lore, and of course, Big John, the Master of Fun. How are you guys doing today?
Oh, I'm doing excellent. Excellent. It's a great Saturday.
Yeah, nice and chill. I'm going to be doing a fair amount of hiking with my dog today, and a fair amount of writing sweet lore for Immortal. So things are good.
Nice. Here we are. We've arrived here at the question and answers portion of the show. I want to let you guys know that you can ask us any questions that you want. We won't necessarily answer all of them, but the odds are pretty good that we will. So if you want to ask Big John what his favorite color is, if that's your burning passion and desire, if you need to know, ask that question, and then we'll get it answered for you. Unless, of course, that's part of something that John isn't going to share with people. Favorite color being a very personal thing,
Very
right?
personal,
So don't want to get too personal, but a little bit. So we already have our first question in here. DT Rage 91. I'm not even sure if you realized that you were asking the question and answers, but here it is, quite relevant. Where is the Master of Funk? There are a lot of theories there are a lot of ideas, a lot of creative space here. So I want to start with Dylan. Have you seen the Master of Funk recently? Do you know where he is or her? Actually, we don't have a gender here, so we're not.
Yeah,
We're actually
so the Master of
mysterious.
Funk, is the mysterious 5th Karathi Immortal. It is the Arash of Funk, and it's coming to a Making Immortal stream during a future April 1st
Right.
episode.
Yeah, I believe the it's all bass, just like the soundtrack for that Immortal. If you're playing that Immortal, it's all like Alex Mula, like, you know, funk covers on the bass. That's all you hear.
One of their vanguards
addicting.
is the Epic Sax guy.
Yep.
Well, as close as we can get without infringing on copyright.
Yeah, because that's some copyright stuff. We have to go up some big guns if we're gonna deal with the Epic Sax man. Granos asks, are we in the question and answer session yet? Great question. As part of the question and answer session, we are currently in the question and answer portion of the show. Thanks so much, Granos, for the question. Rhodey asks, very important question, number 2. We're getting the big stuff out of the way here. How many left feet do you have? Personally, I hate to be boring, but I got standard one left foot. You know, I've got one left foot and one backward foot, just like everybody else.
Are we talking like physically or metaphorically? Because when I'm dancing, I definitely have 2 left feet.
Definitely have 2, right? And then you stop dancing, and it reverts back to a right foot. Then.
Yep, it's like a quantum state. It exists in.
It's kind of Schrodinger's left foot, right?
Yep.
I see. Kaliel asks, how far is Aru implementation into the alpha? Like structures that are in, models that are looking nice. What's in so far? Where are we at right now?
Yeah, so currently we're a decent way into it. It's mostly the first third of the faction is in like more or less the implementation phase. We're basically just hitting texturing, making sure the textures play nice in the engine, and sizing the assets to an appropriate size. Our playtesters, as our playtesters know, the size of the Masked Hunter and the Thorn are inverted currently, and that has mostly to do with just it's a number of things. Basically, their default importation sizes for the Unreal Engine for 3D assets. So some stuff will look very small, other stuff will look much bigger, and it's just something you have to tweak and customize as it goes. Between basically a bunch of missing textures that have been made but haven't been imported and set up correctly yet. That's kind of where we're at. But we have a ton of other units in concept that I'm sure John can talk to, because he's done stuff for the Queedle and Behemoth on stream. We're chugging right along.
Yeah, actually, let's go ahead and get into that. John, you want to talk to us a little bit about any of the stuff that's not in the game yet that you've worked on, or that you like, you're interested in, that you have ideas about? Share a little bit of upcoming
so much
Aru.
I'd like to talk about, but I will try and keep it to revealed Aru stuff. Because of the whole rules thing. Right now I'm working on the Queedle and Behemoth, which are basically, they're going to be like these sky whales, I guess it'll look like. It'll just be like this resplendent like garden on top of a flying whale thing. Very I don't know a good analog, but it's going to be really cool. It's been a lot of fun to work on, and it shoots these. Dylan, correct me if I'm wrong here, but it has 6 of them that it can fire, right?
Yeah, after an upgrade.
Yeah, after an upgrade, it can fire 6 total, and it's basically like these little things that like launch in the ground. They're like these little like leeches or whatever creatures, and they're super cute. I had a lot of fun designing them, and oh yeah, it's great. It's so that's been one thing I've been working on, and then of course seeing a lot of the other like Immortals vanguards go through production and stuff has been really, really cool. I'm very excited to see that show up in the alpha. I don't know how much of those I can talk about, but we've got some cool, Bone Stalker, that kind of stuff coming up.
Yeah, Bone Stalker is just finished concept, Zol's first Immortal, and we have her second one, the Whitewood Reaper, starting concept. Yeah.
Can I talk any about the third Aru Immortal?
I think hold on to it. When we have a lull in the questions, we'll hit it up. So keep it in your keep it in your brain.
That sounds good.
Granas 1988 asks, as a huge long fan of the project, which we all know and love. What's up, Granas? I would like to support you guys. Is it possible to become an alpha collector via PayPal? Unfortunately, the Kickstarter rules are quite strict and difficult to get around. So we've had, unfortunately, quite a few folks from South America and Europe and otherwise around the world who have having issues with the credit card issue. It's something that we are looking for alternatives to. We have a whole bunch of people that haven't been able to support the Kickstarter because of that. So stay tuned. We're looking for more avenues and more options, probably post Kickstarter. Okay, thanks, Granas. Appreciate that. Carlo4 asks, if I buy Alpha on the Kickstarter, we'll be able to play some 1v1s? Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, oh, yeah. You'll be able to play some 1v1s. Do keep in mind that we're currently in pre-alpha. Alpha will hit late this year. We're not sure precisely when, but we'll keep you updated on that. And as we get closer, the approximations will get more and more precise. Thank you for the question, Carlo4. So excited for the art. Mr. Hydralisk, I think, has a question. On the Kickstarter, I saw many different iterations of the Altar of the Worthy. What made you go with the current design out of the many iterations you were floating? What are the artistic factors that go into deciding which design is the officially chosen one, and why the other iterations didn't match up?
You want to talk about that, John? Because I believe you're the one who took that on the front line.
Yeah, I did. So there are a lot of factors that go into choosing iterations and how we move forward from a bunch of silhouettes and shapes. And, you know, it's kind of in the beginning, it's very loose. It's very, you know, what if we had this, or what if, you know, what if this thing shot out these crazy, you know, plan whatevers. And basically we don't have any like really strict, you know, things that keep us boxed in as far as design goes. But we have to very quickly shave off a lot of that extra fat when it comes to creative designs, because we got to move it through the pipeline. And so what we do, we've got a set of criteria, a criteria-based design, going through and making sure that the designs meet that criteria, like readability, you know, making sure that it fits the theme and the you know, the faction's flavor, you know, keeping it simple. And so sometimes we'll also use keywords. So like, for instance, the Altar of the Worthy, we want sacrificial temple, kind of almost a altar for, like, you know, like, of course, altar for the worthy, but like how would you imagine this Altar of the Worthy looking in terms of, like, you know, an Aru, let's say like a Mass Hunter, for example. You see them being spawned. What would that look like from the Aru of the Worthy? And it's the Altar of the Worthy, and it's a really it's kind of a process of elimination, and there's a lot of concepts, of course, that you want to keep, but the part of being a concept artist is you can't stay attached to one concept. You have to be flexible and willing to go in different directions and try different stuff. So ultimately, it's the art director's call. Our art director is Javier Romo, and he went through and basically, based off the criteria that we have set and his personal vision, we went through and decided together on things that we wanted, and eventually came up with what we got. Hopefully that answered the question.
Yeah, I think the other thing that's really important when approaching sort of the form and function of a RTS structure is you need to have very strong shape language that focuses the eye on sort of a central like element. And I think kind of the design that we settled on really typifies that. It's a pyramid with these really cool accentuating claw-like roots that are focusing the eye towards this like apex of the pyramid with these beautiful rivers of blood going down. So it really gives a strong and iconic silhouette. And that's something that we want to repeat as many times as we can.
Yeah, we went through a lot of, like, for instance, like the shape at the top of the temple. We went through a lot of little iterations of that. You know, you want every single thing to be memorable, readable, and flavorful, and have this, like, you know, you want it to be exciting to build that structure. I mean, of course, for anyone that's not RTS, that may like not play RTS very much, they're kind of like, that sounds kind of weird. But if you play RTS enough, you want your favorite structures to be like, oh man, that feels good to build, you know. And I like looking at that. One of my favorite units comes from that building, so you want it to all be kind of homogenous and come together.
Yeah, you want a tight look, and players spend a lot of time looking at their bases. So
yeah. And let me tell you, making leaves and roots not get too busy on a concept is difficult. It's really difficult.
Or modeling for that matter. Yeah, that was
my gosh, poor
one of our
modelers.
biggest challenges.
Yeah.
All right, man, that was a heck of a question. Great job. Appreciate it, Mr. Hydralisk. Got some of the insights into the process there. Also, this isn't a question, but I'm going to read it anyway. So excited for the alpha. Love the Kickstarter emails, by the way. Really awesome to see the progression in the art. Thank you so much, Adam Morris. Adam Morris has been retweeting my stuff on Twitter for like the entire time that I've ever been doing anything in StarCraft and gaming. Thank you for sticking with me. Appreciate it, man. Hope you're enjoying Immortal. We have another critical question here. I think this one is for Dylan. Do you take Dogecoin?
I have in the past. I have looked at. I have actual coins with dogs on them. I'm pretty sure that's what you mean.
Yep. Yeah. If I handed you one of those coins, would you take it?
Yes, I like dogs.
Excellent. Okay. So the answer is yes, DT Rage 91. Thank you for the question. Another question from Kalia. Another question. Carpenter and Tom and Dylan. All right, Carpenter. It was like,
you listen here, Carpenter.
You're back on the football field, man. You're like, Carpenter.
The football field, which I definitely was on a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. I do lots of sports ball.
Yeah.
All of them.
I'm always
Tennis.
rooting for the ball to win the sports. What was the artistic or gameplay inspiration for the Aru? I think body horror was talked about a bit in a previous interview, but what else did you want them to evoke?
Dylan, if you want to talk about gameplay, and I can talk about some artistic stuff,
Good move.
Yeah. So I'll hit gameplay, talk a bit about the cultural reference points and how they evolved, and then pass it off to you for envisioning it and taking that concept and dialing it up to 11. So Aru actually were literally the first faction we designed. And it comes from basically a core formula of this primordial, really primitive mod way back when that was focused on very tight compositions where an entire faction was no more than 4 or 5 units. This was the Raise mod era, which was a hero game. But the key formula was a unit that was a composition that was built on the back of a marine-like unit, a siege tank-like unit, because you have very good gameplay elements there, where you have these nimble but fragile ranged troops supported by these strong positional units, and then the Dark Templar, this sort of nimble assassin thing. So it created this interesting trifecta. And remarkably, that actually is one of the few things that made it at a 1-for-1 basis all the way to the present. The Masked Hunter is a nimble, fragile ranged unit. The Resident, which we'll be talking about in a future episode, is a strong sort of siege slash dislodger slash area control unit. It's the closest analog that we can get to a siege tank and have healthy gameplay in Immortal, as well as the Bloodbound, which we are revealing today along with the Masked Hunter. So it came down like early on, even we knew we wanted to be channeling ancient Mesoamerican cultures, specifically the Aztec Empire. And kind of from there, it kind of emerged naturally as, oh yeah, this is a blood faction. They can overclock their units to, drain their HP for these cool buffs, and you can redline them pretty aggressively. And it just lent itself very well to this like very aggressive, very mobile faction, very harass focused that could pivot into more positional styles. So it's one of the rare instances of bottom up design in Immortal. And then a ton of work kind of came in. Initially, they were, I think, a human faction, but they quickly became non-human just because it opened up a lot more. It made them more distinct and unique, especially in comparison to like Karoth and the Iron Republic. So, yeah, once we had a clear idea that they're going to be these blood sylvan plant people, it came down to a really interesting series of problems of how to realize that, because there are actually a lot of ways we could go.
Yeah.
All right.
John?
So I was going to say pretty much Dylan really covered the bases on that question. I would just say, as far as when it leaves creative and gameplay vision and goes into art, basically, every artist brings in their own kind of interpretation of the vision, and then it's the vision holders' jobs to kind of steer it and make sure that we keep that original vision while also including, just like different little pieces of everyone's input and personality. And so one of the things that was being thought of a lot when working on the design for the Aru is, what did they look like before they became Aru? And you play a little bit of 4D chess when you are designing something that has as rich a history and as much lore as was written out. One of the things that made me fall in love with this project when I first joined was the Aru faction, because of the lore that Dylan had written. I was like, hey, what is this? What is this faction? He was like, oh yeah, I can send you something, and he sent me like a book of this lore and all this history, and it was so cool. And I was like, okay, that we're gonna do Karoth first, but I can't wait to get to the Aru. And so, to keep things feeling as rich and interesting as the lore that I read that day, we wanted to go back and think about, well, the Sylv, how did they evolve? What did they look like? And then when they broke off, how did that change them? Because that was a huge moment in their history. And so, it's definitely a challenge, but probably the most fun challenge that you can have. Like, it's a great problem to have.
All right. Thanks so much, guys, for the detailed question. We've got another one from Mr. Hydralisk. What was the design idea behind designing Aru faces the way they look right now?
Ooh, yeah. Okay. So,
Question.
yeah, that is a good question. So, the main design idea has really evolved over time a lot. Javier, our art director, is really extremely detail oriented and really wants to focus in on what the anatomy of every part of the Aru would look like, and how it changes, because the Sylv actually don't have mouths, and they don't have like noses, like on their faces. And so when they became Aru, they slowly became more and more organic, and they formed mouths, and they formed noses. So the way that came about played into what the face structure of the Sylv were like before, and then how that kind of naturally occurred and changed within the body as it evolved. So we looked at some feline facial structure things, like kind of like the the nose and like some aspects of like an Aztec or like a Mayan face, like the very forward facing bridge of the nose, and mixed with the feline aspect of like, you know, the nose kind of ends up here rather than down here, and really steering away from a human face and exploring some different things. We looked at some faces from Avatar and from you know, just a few like cultural stuff, and also like uh, actual people as well, and just kind of like combined all of that into some really cool personality. And I can say that we will be showing in detail the face in a future, possibly cinematic.
Oh my God! What?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the big things, the feline face came from Javier, and it was to emphasize both how like we wanted them to feel graceful and predatory. We don't want the Aru to just come across as a collection of monsters and like, you know, like come across as a very primitive faction. We want them to come across as pretty sophisticated, drawing their power from, I mean, a natural world, Lakulathon's vision of what the natural world should be, and being, you know, a very sophisticated society. And I think the feline face kind of creates, or a feline derived face, kind of subtly sets up expectations for that. Because I don't know about you, but a lot of cats I know are fairly savvy, with the exception of Brown.
Brown is wonderfully non-savvy. It's fantastic.
No, he's the best.
Love Brown. Thanks
Brown
for the
is
question,
my
Mr.
cat,
Hydrant.
by the way, guys.
Yeah.
They're being mean to my boy.
Inch, what's going on? How big is the lore Bible in pages?
Oh God. So yeah, this is a little bit of how the sausage is made. I feel like I'm revealing my unkempt bedroom. So there's basically 3 different lore Bibles, and there is each with different sizes. There is the official, like what we call the Immortal Historia, which is the source of truth that is constantly being edited and updated and added to. That is damn near, I think, 200 pages at this point. Then there is basically the workstation that I have, which is many different sort of organized documents that hit different parts of lore that is not finalized, that is in very sort of like, it's like in its first draft. It's rough, but it is stuff that will be canon. The question is what details go where, and plugging everything in it and making sure basically it makes sense within the context of established history, that it's building off of established norms, and that it is rock solid. It is mostly past that, but it still needs to, you know, have a few sanity checks and then get dialed in and then added to the Historia after everything is checked. Then there is like Dylan's brainstorm notes, which are mad ravings, and those are, I have those all the time. I actually have here. This has just a bunch of scrawlings of various faction ideas, lore ideas. It looks like something out of the like Silva Pepe like meme from Always Sunny, and that has a ton of stuff that may get cut, may not get cut, may find a place, may not. And that's just sort of what I go over with John and Javier and Donovan, and slowly piece together and go, okay, this is a cool idea. Where can we find a home for it? When can we find a home for it? So baseline is 200. And I'd say I have probably at this point 500 or 600 accumulated pages of just stuff that may eventually make it in. But there's a lot of quality checks that have to be met for it to become canon. We hold our lore to a very high standard.
All right. Great question. Thank you very much, Inch. Can Goose, not Can't Goose, Can Goose. Thank you, Can Goose. Can Goose hangs out on the stream regularly. How important do you guys find the balance of gameplay and lore? And how do you find that lore affects the gameplay and the unit abilities and stats?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Obviously, like with a competitive game, like gameplay is king. However, like we found it to be a bit of a trap to, or a mistaken assumption to assume that just because gameplay is a prime, like is the prime criteria that has to be fulfilled, it doesn't like it's exclusionary to the lore. It certainly limits like what you can reasonably expect a unit to do. You can't have a unit just vomit a ton of like lightning onto the screen and obscure like really important information. But it definitely doesn't stop you from being able to design up. So yeah, I'd say it's sort of we take an approach where we go, okay, what is the thematic like vibe and energy of this faction? What are they about? What like emotional points of resonance? What's the fantasy that we want to drive home? And that actually informs a ton about the mechanics. And then with regards to mechanical gameplay, we basically have a very well realized theory of what a core sort of RTS experience needs to provide for different kinds of compositions. So, you know, just to use some StarCraft analogs, because most people are somewhat familiar with them, you can have strong, like durable melee focused compositions. You can that are based on a unit like a zealot. You can have like nimble ranged fragile compositions where you have units that are kind of similar to a marine, or you can have a sort of small nimble like swarmy melee focused faction, which would be of course like the Zergling and Zerg. So each of those archetypes will naturally create certain design pressures and fill out a little bit of the sandbox that faction wants, because you have to support that kind of common plentiful unit. But from there, you know, it becomes a lot more open-ended, and you can plug and play in, you know, different kinds of positional units, different kinds of, you know, casters. And yeah, so I guess our process is much more holistic than I think is standard for the industry. And I think the results are, frankly, much more striking and interesting gameplay, where you have mechanics that make you feel like you are actually commanding the civilization in battle.
Tom, you are muted.
Thank you so much for the question. Appreciate it. I also just told a really hilarious joke that would have just, you guys would have been laughing so hard, but I'm sorry you missed it. Part of jokes is timing, and so we're going to have to move on from it. And I feel really bad that you've missed out on this. My best joke that I've ever made. It's gone now. Granus 1988.
Savage.
It's awful. What was your biggest concerns when creating Aru, and maybe the specific Immortals? This might be a good time to bring in that Immortal number 3. I think you were talking about, Big John.
Yeah, excellent.
Yeah, or maybe not. You make the call. Maybe. You make the call. You have the info,
I was just going to say that the first thing that came to mind is making things not too noisy on screen. There's a lot of detail. There's a lot of color that comes with being a plant person. But you just can't express yourself that much when you're trying to be seen in large groups from an RTS perspective far away. Sorry, my cat's...
We love your cat. You don't have to apologize for Brown. Every time his tail appears, the viewer count goes up by 10.
Yeah, well, I mean, you know. But the other thing actually was interesting. It was hard to not make them look like lava people. Believe it or not, if you have any red on a unit, contrasted with a darker color, it looks like lava. And it's really difficult to solve that problem. And we tried quite a bit. Another one was we wanted originally the Aru to have a white and red color scheme. And when I say wanted, I mean we still do. And we're going to have a skin line or something that will reflect that. But it was really difficult. You know, they look like little peppermints running around the screen. And we just, you know, it's a lot of stuff that you have this initial vision and it seems so good in your head, but when it's in practice in the actual game, you know, it doesn't translate. So you have to make compromises, and sometimes those compromises, like with what we have at the Aru now, lead to something even better. And so, yeah.
Awesome. Thanks so much for the question. Granus 1988. Next up, we've got Brown, and no, we've got Despipori. Oh man, I fucked that up hard. Which criteria do you take in consideration in order to choose the color palette? Ooh, cool. Of the different races and its units. Was it hard? Love the project. Keep up the amazing work. Thank you. Please forgive me for my terrible mispronunciation.
Great question. Oh my God. It's so hard because of the well, there's basically gameplay and readability like criteria that you have to figure out. There's unit roles and communicating that strong centerpiece in a way that is visible 360 degrees is very much something we are still in the process of mastering. And then, you know, how colors work with both faction communicating like power. You know, is this an important unit that is threatening that I have to account for as a threat? And how does it differentiate with team color? And how does that scale to 2v2 instead of 1v1? So yeah, it's definitely been a challenge and an ongoing process. But we've come up with some pretty clever solutions. You want to talk about how have you navigated that problem space, John?
Yeah. So one of the things that it was like the first big conversation when it comes to that is how do we, you know, like Dylan said, integrate player color in a way that feels flavorful. We don't want to have you know, like almost Age of Empires style like green wood, red wood, blue wood, like, you know, just this really, it just, you know, we want it to look really good. And so we have different like colored plants and stuff that are coming out of the Aru, and it just kind of flavors it in a way that almost you know, it looks like they're from like a different tribe or something. It's very, very cool. And you know, basically keeping gameplay number one while also making sure that we don't make huge compromises for lore is definitely a challenge, but one that is easily solved by some cool brainstorming and coming up with ways to integrate you know, the gameplay into the actual lore itself, like with the colored leaves and, you know, the different different aspects of the really visible points of a unit.
All right. Thanks so much for the question. I'm not going to try it again because it'll just embarrass me. Adam Morris asks, how many factions do you guys have started? I know the plan is to have 5 at launch with a space to make 15. Are you guys trying to focus on the 5, or you have been brainstorming a lot about different factions?
Yes, we have done yes. So the cool thing about this, one of the benefits of being a modding community for the better part of a decade is we have a lot of ideas banked up, and we've tested a lot of ideas. So we have probably it's got to be like 150 unique units designed at this point, maybe more. It actually might be closer to 200. And the question is, it's very easy to tweak and modify units to create a different experience. This is something that this kind of design mastery that we've acquired, or this expertise that we've acquired, is one of the things that powers our ability to make really compelling Immortal and Vanguard designs. So yeah, it's mostly about going like, okay, well, we have a unit that we've tested extensively in Vanguard or X or Y mod. This is a really cool idea. Would it make sense in faction X, or would it make more sense in a sister faction or faction Y or Z? And so, you know, there's entire factions that we basically have like effectively like pre-designed and ready to just playtest to make sure the compositions work the way we think they're going to, which is not a guarantee. Aru actually saw like the Bloodbound used to be hilariously overpowered because they're just her identity wasn't sufficiently focused. So initially she had stealth and she had stronger, she was more fragile, but she had more life steal on hit. And it turns out that she could just like teleport and just raffle delete armies and never take real damage. So that ended up getting partitioned into the design space of the Whitewood Reaper, which creates a very distinct assassin experience from the Bloodbound. So anyway, Yeah, we have, I'd say, so in terms of actual implementation, we have units from the first 3 factions implemented currently in game in various stages of readiness. I think Jorah has about 40% of its stuff concepted, maybe 30% in one form or another. And for Iratech, we have a lot of we have their entire faction more or less at this point at a first or in some cases second draft in terms of finalized design, but we're still in the process of finalizing their style guide. And Hair Lush is a little murky. There's a number of questions that have to be answered from both a technical standpoint and a design verification standpoint, but they're more or less like blotted out and statted out again because of our experience in modding. We have beyond that Talmetra, Cardu, Uriah, and a few other factions that I can't talk about for spoiler reasons that have extensive what we call white sheet, both what they're thematically about, the core sort of mechanics that will define them, or the kinds of mechanics that will define their playstyle and differentiate them from their other counterparts. Yeah, so the answer is yes. We actually set aside time during the work week to look ahead on a creative standpoint, John and I, to brainstorm actively and go, okay, well, we had this concept that worked really well in Vanguard, or this thematic element that we like from some other game. Are there ways that we can blend this trope with this trope in a way that's fresh and interesting? And can we marry it to mechanics that we've already explored? So yeah, the answer is yes. First 5 foremost, and we set aside time to look at.
Yeah, got to keep that pipeline going 100% of the time. Got to have early ideas, late ideas, middle ideas, all that stuff.
Yep.
Thanks so much for the
week,
question.
Oh, sorry. I was
No,
just
go
going to
for
say,
it.
during the work week, I work on current concepts, and then on the weekend, I usually spam Dylan with ideas for future stuff that may or may never be seen. But, it's fun.
Yeah, and if you want to see some of that stuff that may or may never be seen, make sure you tune in on Fridays at 4 with Big John. We do live work on the project, stuff that's going to actually be potentially make it into the game. But when you're in the world of concept, some of the stuff doesn't make it in there. So lots of fun. And we also like to leak new information. So definitely tune into that stream if you're interested in the art and these types of things that we've been talking about. Balkarn with the important questions. Dylan, have teapots ever made it into your brainstorm notes?
I can neither confirm nor deny a cutlery expansion.
Yeah, that's
specifically, again, it would be an April 1st launch, a very important window.
Yeah.
By the way, someone way back when was asking a question that's a pretty important onboarding question. Want to make sure we hit that in case they're still around. But the question was, do the Aru worship a god, and if so, how? Yes, they do. The Aru are a sort of tribal confederation, like a theocratic tribal confederation of these different sort of self-organized lineages of different Sylv. Aru Sylv, and they all are bound together by their worship and veneration of the god tree Luculithon. Luculithon, I guess the best way to kind of frame her is she's a sort of life cancer deity. She is life completely unbound by external checks and balances. And she basically she will metastasize across the universe and the multiverse, basically digging in and colonizing different worlds and consuming those biospheres and replacing it, or incorporating into her and replacing those biospheres with her. And there's this interesting element to Luculithon. It's hard to tell how intelligent she is in the way that you and I experience intelligence, but she has this sort of grand vision of basically being able to protect life by consuming and subsuming it within herself and protecting it against the howling dark, against the heat death of the universe. She's referred to among the Aru in these sort of venerated tones as the last mother, the final mother, because she will protect for all of life will eventually be her children. And so the veneration of her is going out and killing and sacrificing, animals and plants to Lakulathon to bring it into her system. And the thought is this is not an act of cruelty or an act of sadism. This is an act of saving that life because she's this sort of living arc god that is going to keep safe that life and preserve the cycle of life and death forever. So the Aru are called them. The reason we call it the altar of the worthy is the Aru call themselves the worthy. Aru means her people, and it sort of speaks to their status as sort of the ultimate arbiters of life and death. What life forms and what societies are worthy of continuing indefinitely, and what needs to be culled from the herd for the greater good of the ecosystem that they protect. So that is a look at their cosmological view on things.
Awesome. Great stuff. Appreciate the question. Alone in Heaven. And I think it was actually quite funny that there was a misspelling, pray with the E. It's actually pretty appropriate. And I was actually concerned that you knew a little bit more than you should. But coincidences occur. Thank you so much for the question. Next question. We're going to do these a little bit out of order. So Jay McConna asks, are the questions from chat or pre-existing? I'm going to answer that question by answering the next question. Jay McConna asks, candy skins, question mark.
So actually, this is a good thing to talk about.
Yep.
We're not Fortnite. Our cosmetics are deeply rooted to the world. That's the integrity of the lore as just part of the brand and just part of the feel and aesthetic is really critical to us. We don't want candy cane, actual like candy cane Aru. It's not, that we're like so self-important that, oh no, we don't want players to have fun. We absolutely do. We just want it to make sense and feel like a cohesive part of this world, because suspension of disbelief is such an important thing for telling a story. And every game is a story. That doesn't say that we can't have radically different skins. So something that League of Legends does really cool, they have the project series of skins and like Darkstar. And they're effectively like alternate takes on their game and, alternate universes where the same characters are lining up, but they're doing different things in a different way. The cool thing about creation is it's very old, and it has ancient and powerful technologies, and the whole point of its storytelling is to talk about possibilities. There is a canonical past and canonical timelines, and there's a canonical present, but beyond that, the future is ultimately kind of open to the player and the player decisions, and we'll have gameplay that ultimately reflects that. These are all theoretical, plausible scenarios that could happen. And so there are skin lines that we have planned that speak to a very specific, maybe unlikely, but possible future that radically affects a faction's destiny. Hopefully that's a useful answer to that question. And I guess the other thing is, like, it is possible that we could do something like during like festive seasons, like have festive season skins that are in line with the theme of that. That would be available for certain events or whatever.
Thanks. Yeah, I intentionally asked that question. Normally it didn't seem like a sincere question, but it's something that I actually had a difficult time understanding initially, the sort of the usefulness of this and the value of this. And so, I want to make sure everyone got a good listen to that. We're really trying to create something sustainable and permanent, that you get a real good feeling from. Thank you so much for the question, Jay McConna. Inch asks, are you guys planning on making an Immortal book? I know there is a Savage Worlds campaign out there somewhere, and with so much lore, it seems doable.
So we can knock this out. Like there's this and like some related questions. So I have someone that I've been talking to, and I can't tell you who they are. But one of our goals is to eventually be able to support more than one game. out of Immortal setting. It's designed to support many different kinds of games and to be rich and diverse enough. Pen and paper is absolutely on the table, and pen and paper like encounter design is really important to how we're going to be approaching PvE, because having different cool like roles within a scenario, an open-ended scenario that can be tag teamed in interesting ways is critical. So yeah, yes, there are exciting things to expect in the future. I don't know when, but it's definitely something we're looking very seriously at as we go into scaling this year and next year. The other thing is, like there is a lore book that we have that looks very nice and we're constantly expanding on. And there's 2 versions that I want to do. The first one is a much more sort of utilitarian, nice, beautiful kind of coffee table book with the lore of basically a giant like manual of the units, like lore and identity, and the factions and the backgrounds and the worlds and all that. That is absolutely planned at some point for a broader like consumer base, and it's certainly something that we're using internally right now and expanding on constantly. The second thing that I want to do is a version of that actually in the characters and language of each individual faction that we do that. So Karathi has a script and a language that is largely inspired from Tajik, Farsi, and Greek, and a little bit of Arabic, just in terms of how the language is set up, in terms of tenses, enclitics, phonetics, that sort of stuff. And so there's a fully realized script to Karath. It's angelic script. So it would be really awesome. My dream is to have a book one day that has all of that information, but it is actually in Karathi. That's a big undertaking, but I think it would be well worth it. And I would like the same thing to happen with Aru, because they have their own writing system. Irtech, they have their own writing system. Hairlesh is interesting because you could have sort of symbols that correspond to meanings in the Ambales universe, or it could be ancient, sort of a corruption of ancient Ray hieroglyphics. So,
awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for the question and for the answer, Dylan. Draknus coming in with the hard energy. I love this. And this is the kind of question that we love to answer, and you can go ahead and bring it in. This is the difference between a respect-focused community and a positivity-focused community. Draknus asks, with making a new game in a genre like RTS that has been dominated only by a few key names and with a lot of eyes from so many other game communities, does the fear of you exist of being stuck in the shadows, so to speak, of names like StarCraft, Age of Empires, or Command and Conquer?
I don't know about, I'd like to hear your take, Tom. My sense is no. I don't feel like we're in anyone's shadow. I feel, if anything, we're standing on the shoulders of giants and pushing the genre to new heights. Like, we've worked in and around, Travis was literally like one of the earliest modders, I think, for CNC. And he was a little wee lad when he was doing that. I mean, I don't know, like, all these games are just part of our DNA. We've been part of those communities in one form or another. And we've just thought long and hard and about like where they struggled or where they excelled, where they pushed, the boundaries forward. So yeah, no, I just think we're part of this process. We're part of this greater community, and yeah, it's just a matter of time before people kind of see that passion and see that commitment. We've never pretended to be something we're not in that respect. Tom, thoughts?
Yeah. I very much agree. There's no fear. But I think, we're trying to get at, is this something that you think about? Is this something that you worry about?
Sure.
And we definitely we look out for that kind of stuff, and we do very much have to consider how we position the product and how we market it and how we get the word out, and all those things are very important. And getting enough attention onto a good product is how you get that, if you get that snowballing. One of the big misconceptions about like making art, kind of like we are here, multidisciplinary art, but it's kind of another form of art, is this idea that it's sort of like, well, you don't need you don't need the marketing. You just need really good work. And if it's really, really good, then it'll sell itself. And that's a really nice idea, but it's not true. You need a little bit of both. And so we're very much looking forward into how we're doing our marketing and all that stuff, and making sure that we stick out. And I think that we've been gaining a lot of popularity, a lot of you new folks here. We got 100 folks on the stream. Definitely the first time we've ever hit 100 folks on the stream.
Yeah,
and
thank
so
you.
yeah, thank you so much for tuning in and participating in Kickstarter and all the stuff that you guys have been doing. We're just growing. So, the more people join up, and, the more we step out of the shadow and into the light, to be a little poetic about it. Let's get on to the next question. Dragnis, thank you. What an awesome question. Really appreciate that.
Flown Canary has a good one that I think
Go
John,
for it. Yeah. Go for it.
All right, John. I'm teeing one up for you. Flown
All right.
Canary asks, were there any particularly strong inspirations you took from the natural world that you guys were super keen to weave into the Aru as a faction, visually or in terms of abilities and or powers?
That is an excellent question. Yeah, so there are a lot of cultural and pop culture references that we have for every faction. And, kind of when it comes to forming ideas, there's, this huge pool of this library of information that floats around. And sometimes you don't consciously think about it, and sometimes you do, but it always sneaks into your designs. And, everything is just a series of past experiences that you're including in. And so, like one of the things that we looked at a lot for the Sylve faction in general are, this Aztec Mayan influence, and the way that their warriors are portrayed in their own art and through other artists' interpretations, and also a little bit of like Japanese culture as well. Mixing in some elements that are very much. My cat is very excited to be a part of the stream right now. Yeah, sorry. But yeah, there are a bunch of references that. I'm so sorry, guys. Cats. All right. There's a bunch of references that are really, really like, I'm trying to think of Florian, one of our other concept artists. Dylan, do you remember one of the things that he posted for references? That I think there was something that we used.
Sorry, my dog is now trying to get up in my lap.
Yeah, we've got
copycat here.
Pet problems here.
Yeah, so I think the key thing is we really try to cast a wide net in terms of this the sources that God, cats are great. The sources that we draw from culturally and in terms of motifs. So one of the big things is the Iratech are partially they're kind of like, I don't know, Mayan samurai. We drew from the shogunate of Japan, the shogunate era of Japan, and as well as, various Mayan city-states, a little bit of the Teutonic Knights and sort of Latvian Crusades, or the Baltic Crusades, I guess. So yeah, like we draw from a wide net, and that definitely, I think that's kind of what makes us fresh. We look in places that other developers don't necessarily look, or if they do, we pair them with things that are somehow thematically concordant. There's these points of natural synergy. Like one of the other things we looked at were like the Gallic tribes and the Celts. for the Aru, and looking at the Druidic traditions, like actual Druidic traditions, and what that means and what that worldview is, and what pendants and symbols those groups of people felt were powerful or significant religiously, and looking for commonalities. And turns out there are a ton. Both cultures did engage in human sacrifice, for example, for religious reasons. And I'm trying to understand the mechanisms of those religious beliefs and the worldview really helps shape a believable culture that translates into art.
All right. Thank you so much for the question. Mr. Hyena Official asks, is the production speed going to increase after the money from Kickstarter arrives? That's not likely. So let me talk a little bit about Kickstarter and what we're doing with it. So a big part of the Kickstarter is about spreading the word about Immortal, talking about what we're doing, and all this kind of stuff. And we're using it to light a signal and say, hey, we're here to make this next great RTS game, and we want your support, and we want to show the world that there are tons of people that are looking for this kind of experience and that want this kind of game, because there's this awful misconception in the world that people don't like these games. Not enough people like these games, and we think that the genre is not a niche genre. It is simply underserved, and we're here to serve. So thank you very much for the question. Production speed will likely be approximately the same, but we're going to be able to do a whole bunch of cool little goodies stuff that we wouldn't have been able to do otherwise, thanks to your support. So thank you for all of that. I do believe we broke 300% funded, so we are accomplishing the goal. Thank you very, very much. That was Mr. Hayne Official. Thank you. DT Rage 91 asks, what will your roles be once players get a hold of these factions and really start pushing their limits and force metas into existence? Will it be more of a hands-off approach for the most part?
It kind of depends. So whenever possible, we want to give players tools and let them figure things out. And the larger the tool set, usually, the easier it is to take that approach. There are going to be times, inevitably, where we screw up, where we overtune a number, or we overlook a particular composition interaction. And rather than trying to plan for every possible configuration, which scales very poorly, because that's the thing about matrices, they grow exponentially in terms of complexity and interaction, and collectively the player base has more brain power than the devs do. With that in mind, the way we get around it is we have sort of an architectural view of how balance can and should work within our game, and looking at whenever we design a unit or an ability or a spell or a faction, we really look for avenues inherently of like, okay, if this is too much, what are our vectors for meaningfully balancing this ability? And if there are too few, the ability has to either be changed or it cannot be used. So that could be something as simple as mana cost or cooldown, range, AoE size. Those are all very well understood. But there are a number of other kind of things with regards to, like, okay, alloy efficiency, ether efficiency, pyre efficiency, how this might interact with range or movement speed buffs, which are generally the most dangerous, because if you can't run away from a fight, the fight becomes a lot more deterministic. So whenever possible, we're looking at, skill shots. League of Legends and Dota 2 are really good about this, of finding different ways to counter strategies just by employing countermeasures and having things like cleanse effects or, Black King Bar. These are ways that we can have extreme abilities, as long as there are foils to them that we seed throughout the faction or the Immortal. Or the Immortal cast. And Immortals, I think, here are our biggest deal. We're still a little early to kind of showcase that, but Resh, for example, is going to be kind of, since he's sort of the Lord Inquisitor, they're the Lord Inquisitor Angel. they have dedicated anti-caster units that can strip buffs or casting resources, and they're very effective at this. So because Resh exists, we can have something crazy for Mala down the road, just to be an example, or a Telmetron Artificer that does crazy effects. Because we're going to be seeding the environment well beforehand with things that can prey upon that strategy. Hopefully that's a good answer.
I thought that was excellent, Dylan. Thank you very much, and thank you for the question. Lakum. Oh man, there's too many vowels. Is this a French word? There's too many vowels in a row. How long does it take for you, Big John? How long does it take for you to design the very first unit for Aru? I mean, when you brainstorm about some Aru faction, have you designed first environment or building or unit? So kind of, I think the question is, what units? Where do you start? Units, environment, building.
Yeah, it's a good question.
What's the first thing?
Yeah.
So, that's a good question, because the first thing I ever did for SunSpear was actually a Aru unit. It was a test to see if my understanding of concept fit the needs of the game, and like my style and all that stuff. And so they said, hey, can you take this idea and turn it into a concept? And so the answer to your question is really inconsistent, I would say. That unit was done in, I think, about 4 hours, concept-wise. The timeline, I think, was like 3 days tops, and I sent in something 4 hours later, and we ended up actually more or less using it. Other units have been concepted and reworked over the course of many months.
What's like the horror story? Like, what's the quintessential, oh God, not this again?
Oh man. Oh, it hurts.
I mean, this is about making immortal, right?
It is about making immortal.
We're talking about the highs. This is one of the lows.
Yeah. So sometimes units will, through a series of miscommunications or like hiccups in process and that kind of things, switching deadlines, that's a big one. Things will change, and it incurs rework. And so let's see, a good example. I'm gonna use Mala. As designing an immortal has proven to be, now we kind of have the process down pat, but in the early days, we wanted to show what made our game so great, which is the Immortals themselves. It's a cast of characters that are very, interesting, and they have a lot of implications for the world and for the gameplay. So before we had a lot of the gameplay solved, we designed a bunch of Immortals. And so I want to say for Mala, there was about 20 different turnaround sheets, thumbnails, RTS perspective stuff when we were looking at, are they going to be represented in the game in some way? What will that look like? Should Mala have a bunch of these roots? Can we animate that? Is that possible? And so before we had a strong process down, it was a lot of kind of firing blindfolded. And so that question is great, because the answer to it is becoming less and less inconsistent every day. Working on getting a good process down and making units, like, I don't know, I guess I would say, what would you say, Dylan? Like, from concept being like 1 week or 2 weeks max?
Yeah. The goal is 10 days to finish. And there were many times last year where we just miserably failed that because it turns out like making an RTS is hard. That's why in part I think we aren't living in a bevy of very like dominant RTSs is just there's a lot of factors that you have to very like systemically take into account and go, okay, we're communicating this information now, and we're communicating this level of lethality or this role. Also, we're doing it, across 3 screens with 200 units, 200 characters.
During a
So,
pandemic, completely
yeah,
remotely, with no money.
So yeah, there's a lot of modifiers, but I think at this point we can, as the team like continues to gain experience and continues to hone. I think the biggest area of growth actually over the last like 8 months has just been the system of optimizing the pipeline and just getting people into a position where they can confidently go, okay, this asset needs to do and look like this. Bam, bam, bam. Quick check works, great. Pass it on next. We're getting really good at that, and I think it's about time that we start looking to scale and teaching those lessons to a larger team.
Thank you so much for the answer. Thank you for the question. LP Fishtails asks, are there any plans to have a meme style immortal? One that is clearly less powerful than the others, but has some gimmick.
So I'm going to channel Donovan in the chat here. That is a false choice. You can have, we here at SunSpear do not let our memes be dreams. I'll give you a good example of a future immortal. Decker is a mad lad. He takes sort of the charge and grid system that we have for the Iron Republic and kind of dials it up to 11 in a very specific way that will produce let's call it a very memorable play style, and especially a very memorable play experience from the opponent's view. I think Decker and Zol is going to probably be, I think the big thing is we're going to have emergent meme compositions that can just sort of snooker people out of a game. In a way that's very funny and will fold to serious like counterplay or serious counter efforts. So Immortals have kits that really inform and allow you to break the game in novel and cute ways. So Decker, just one of his abilities I've talked about in the chat or in the Discord, has been basically he comes from a background of smuggling and like illicit activities, and he has been out of desperation on the part of the Iron Republic, promoted suddenly to general, and his band of outlaws have been integrated into the Republican army. So he still has all these bags of tricks from his days in the frontier as a bandit lord. And so one of his abilities is he makes a smuggler's tunnel. Basically, think of this as a Nidus canal that doesn't cost resources aside from Pyre, and is hidden. So it is cloaked until an enemy unit comes within a certain range of it. And these are permanent structures. So if you don't take care of them, they're going to just blossom all over the map and cause no end of havoc to the opponent. That is, I think, like if that's not a meme or doesn't create meme moments, especially with other. Keep in mind that this can transport allied units as well. So units that may be very slow and cumbersome and thick, all of a sudden can teleport across the map. Hypothetically, even air units like the Behemoth or the Atlas, something like that. All of a sudden, you can create this sort of absurd, funny storytelling, and it can be very powerful. It's just we have very clear forms of counterplay for this thing, and very clear forms of vulnerability. So yeah, we're going to have meme commanders and definitely meme combinations. Yeah, they don't have to be weak.
One of the things I plan on doing when the game launches is I'll be watching streams, and there's gonna be no way to resist the temptation to sketch out some of these literal scenarios that happen, like trying to stuff a behemoth in a small tunnel and have it pop out of the ground. It's gonna be really fun.
Yep. Yeah, I am very excited about Decker using his ult in conjunction with Zol using her ult for like the double meme time, where all of a sudden your units are very fast. They're just going to be sucker punching the enemy base across 4 or 5 different fronts, and the opponents can't see more than like 5 feet in front of them. If that ever happens in a pro game, I'm going to lose my shit. Because we price those very deliberately to have a steep opportunity cost, and you're going to be giving up a lot of power in more incremental fights to afford those abilities. And if that happens, it's going to be like, you know, Huck going like, "Oh, don't worry, that's Halo. Don't worry about people chanting Mothership," you know, stuff like that. Yeah.
Cool stuff. Thank you so much for the question, LP Fishtails. Next question is from Static P. Static P, by the way, I'm seeing you in the server. Awesome presence. Thank you for being respectful in the server. Appreciate you. Once the game is well released, not just released, mind you, but well released. This isn't a rare or a medium rare release. This is well released. Would you consider continuing these streams to give updates on implementations and patches? Consider, beyond
yeah.
consider, it's planned. It's happening.
Yeah.
We did these or something similar to this last year. Tried a bunch of different things, iterated, kind of like we do with design, where we'll keep iterating on it. So you might see different versions of this sort of a thing develop in the future as we evolve. But we will always be talking to you guys, listening to your questions, answering them. We're here to build the game with you, and we're here to be teachable and to listen and to learn. Of course, we have our very strong vision for what we want, and we're building it, and you can hop on that train and help us build it with you. So thank you so much, Static P. Appreciate the question. Inch asks, ooh, this is a good one.
Yeah.
How do you plan on preventing players from feeling as though they're forced to pick Resh rather than a preferred Orzum strategy when faced against crazy spellcasters like Mala?
Bans.
Yep. So we have a number of layers. And Monte Cristo and and I have had some interesting discussions about this already, because he says there's some pretty steep cost to bans. We're going to be testing out bans pretty extensively early and often, because it gives, especially when you have an ecosystem as large as Immortal, where you're going to have each faction like just has the design space naturally to support probably like 9 Immortals probably over the course of the game's lifespan. That's just a huge bevy of things that players need to be able to account for. And there will be powerful or sort of flavor of the month or dominant strategies that will naturally emerge, because that's just how game matrix work. You can have very reasonable balanced power levels, but because power levels have different shapes in different areas, being able to mix and match them can be very powerful. So being able to, or giving players the ability to disrupt those combinations, or force combinations into configurations that they can counterpick, is just such a powerful and easy way to give players the ability to just not get run over by the same dominant composition over and over again. That's one. Two, we create multiple vectors of weaknesses. It's not like, yes, Orzum has like this one exploitable weakness, and you have to counterpick exactly with a certain kind of immortal to get him. Orzum has like all other immortals, he replaces 2 units with 2 other units with distinct weaknesses and advantages. So there's, one of the easiest ways to say counteract Orzum, for example, is you just run around him because he really wants to stick in a spot, and he's like, haha, I'm going to make you fight me. And it's like, well, no, you're not. Like, I can just ignore you, and you have to like try to actually aggressively siege up on my base. So I can counter you by basically forcing you to dislodge yourself. I can fight you by going around you and harassing your economy or your allies' economy. And similarly, in the case of very powerful casters or caster-oriented immortals like Mala, we account for that with the cost. Like, yeah, she replaces the Red Seer, which is sort of a powerful but fairly massable, I guess the best analog would be like a High Templar kind of unit for the Aru. She replaces it with the Dread Sister, one of like the original priestesses or a Sylvan priest to join her during the first conversion to Lakulathon. And that is a much more expensive unit and a very powerful unit, but that is a lot more army supply and resources concentrated into a single body. So there's natural, like, oh, you don't need to have like rush to kill that unit. It can be any nimble assassin-like unit, and we make sure that most compositions have a tool that can get that job done regardless of who's playing. So hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you very much. Next question is from G_Bones_. Hey lads, I think you've mentioned you had a way of measuring the strength of a unit with power budgeting. Can you elaborate on this a bit? Like, how does it take into account interactions with other units? You have a massive continuous state space. Seems really tricky. Can't wait to get wrecked in Alpha Lol.
There'll be a lot of wrecking going around, and I'll be right there with you. So this actually kind of joins with the last question. At a certain point, you can't track it, but what you can do is you can visualize where, like numerically, how well a unit is going to excel in certain areas. And the two big areas that you have to be very cognizant of is movement speed and attack range. Those are as well as like movement type. So ground, hover, and flying are kind of the big three. Flying is by far the like biggest sort of cost multiplier for a unit. I think we do actually have a power budget calculating formula, at least with vitality, damage, and overall like fighting power. But at a certain point, that's not super useful because of the reasons you stated of like, well, at a certain point, we're going to have a faction or an immortal that pairs really, really well with any given unit. And that's fine. Like, I'd actually argue that that's a feature. The discovery of powerful combinations is a form of good gameplay. There's just the question is, how is that strategy disrupted? If there are too few avenues, then we need to make some adjustments. If there are plenty, then it's fine. Yeah, hopefully that I guess the other thing is just sort of accounting for costs. So opportunity costs, resource costs, timing and attack windows, giving windups to spells, all that stuff are things that we constantly look at a case-by-case basis of going, okay, is this ability potentially oppressive? How likely is it oppressive in a specific context? Okay, well, then we need to add this extra layer of counterplay inherently to it. And so far, that's done very well by us.
Thank you so much, G_Bones_ for the question. Next question is from Mega Fresh Lemons, not the regular fresh lemons that you know, but even better. Is there any potential for offline/LAN play, or is that already completely off the table? Game's looking great. Excited to try it out. Thank you so much. I'll take this one. Unfortunately, it's very, very unlikely we'll be doing offline play or LAN. It's something that's possible, but there's a lot of things that make it more difficult from a tech standpoint and especially from a security standpoint. And so we have to, like most of the things that we do, we would love to have LAN play, but as far as we can tell right now, the costs are too big. That, of course, could change in the future, and it'll change based on what kind of resources we have and what we can do. So that's kind of the state of the moment. Hopefully, we can improve things in the future. Thank you for the question, Mega Fresh Lemons. Appreciate it. Dr. Boson asks, new Immortal design session streamed publicly when?
Every Friday.
Just live pushing for more transparency in design. Dr. Boson, a voice for the people. I think we're gonna have to say to be determined, my lad. We're gonna have to ask the powers that be how much we can let loose and how much we have to keep behind the curtain.
Sorry, is my mic working right now?
You're good. Come on in.
Yeah, we kind of do that every Friday. Every Friday on our art stream at 4 p.m. PST. we have, I guess we almost kind of call it spoiler stream at this point, but we do like a live drawing thing where we show what we're up to, what we're doing, what we're designing, and I'll usually draw, whatever it is that I'm working on at SunSpear currently, and sometimes those are Immortals. So if you ever want to check that out, join the art stream on Fridays.
Yeah, and sometimes some new bit of information that's never been shared publicly before accidentally gets shared occasionally, sometimes on 4 o'clock on Fridays.
Also, if you have an idea for what you'd like to see, like it's like, hey, maybe you should draw a teapot in that concept, and you can hide it away, and the modelers won't ever notice until they're literally modeling it. Those are things you can all do. You have that power. So come check out the art streams on Friday. I do my best to incorporate the ideas and memory that is in the chat, and see how far it gets snuck through.
Yep, absolutely.
Wonderful time. You'll see me and Dylan, or hear me and Dylan up on the art stream on Fridays. Not every Friday, once in a while. We do like to bring in also kind of a rotating cast of folks. If you want to meet more of the folks that are working on SunSpear, some of the other artists and animators, go ahead and check out on this very stream, on this very twitch.tv/SunSpear game stream. You can check out the stream 4 o'clock p.m. Pacific on Fridays. Next question: will there be cinematics for each Immortal, like some video with lore to build more hype around them?
I can take that.
Mm-hmm.
So currently, I am kind of the cinematic director guy here at SunSpear. I am working with a team of amazing people from South America, and they're two teams actually. Leyenda Studios, and the Audio Hive. Those are two amazing studios full of amazing people, and we currently have no end to the plans of the things that we can tease and hype up and show. Cinematics are very costly, and they are definitely something we would love to, in an ideal world, have a bunch of, but we're kind of right now, we've been planning on showcasing some different launch factions in a really detailed and exciting way, while also having like art feature lore drops that we show. We've got one coming up pretty soon. I don't know how much I can talk about it, but it's going to be really cool. Kind of showcasing an Immortal and doing some lore stuff, maybe some music. There's all kinds of things that are being cooked up right now to build up hype around certain factions and really kind of give people an idea of the feel of the faction, because visuals don't just do it justice. There's a lot more that goes into a faction than just the 2D aspect of it. There's the sound, the music, like what do their voices sound like, all that stuff. So there's a lot going into it, and we will be cooking up and serving that out as often as we can. Tom, you were muted again.
Thank you very much. That was GuzMan24, one of our harbingers. Thank you, my lad, for being a wonderful and respectful human being on the internet, and especially in our Discord. One Zerg warrior to rule them all. Will blood and gore be like SC1 or more toned down like SC2? The SC1 voice sounds pretty brutal compared to the latter.
So so there's a VFX question and an SFX question. Yeah. Our SFX is going to be focusing less on like high fidelity, super realistic sounds, and like more towards iconic and readable sounds that just scream, this is what this unit is. The golden standard is like the StarCraft 1 lurker spike sound, where it's and it just sounds so violent and scary, as well as the zealot strike. It's just so, it's like the most brutal savage lightsaber I can imagine. So definitely communicating that like visceral soundscape is really important. We're not there yet. It's not. You do SFX much later in the pipeline, but that's very much an objective we're going in with that. And the SFX that we have in the game right now are not final. They are effectively placeholder. So regarding gore, there's a lot of things that we have to contend with. This is more of an open-ended and unresolved question. You have to look at, what certain markets that you want to get into are willing to accept and what the costs are of making gore like a toggleable deal. I would, I think somewhere in the middle. If I get to have like my perfect vision for violence and immortal creation is a very harsh setting. It looks beautiful and striking at a surface level, and it is, but that belies sort of the danger and barbarity and just sort of the brutality of that world. It's an old battle scarred setting, and I do want to bring that kind of drama and heaviness to gameplay. If we can do that while being able to engage with, be in accordance with, ratings and local, needs, for markets like say South Korea, then I think we'll do that. But that's more of a technical question, and my tentative answer is yes, probably we'll be somewhere in the middle. We don't want to shy away from violence; it's a war game, but we want to make sure that it feels right for the setting, and it's right for our business practices.
All right, thank you very much, Zerg Warrior. We are big fans of Brood War sound design here at SunSpear Games. The Zergling attacking the building in Brood War is one of my favorite sound effects, if not my favorite of all time.
Yep.
Alone in Heaven. Alone in Heaven asks, you mentioned the Aru are supposed to look dangerous and graceful. Do we have any sound samples on what they sound like yet? We don't have any sound samples. Do we have any descriptions or ideas, or do we want to say wait for later?
This is a future episode, right?
Yeah.
That's a wait thing. Right now, that has all been stuff that's been swirling around in the sphere of creativity up at the creative department at SunSpear. Right now, we are working on some voice line stuff, some sound mood board stuff. But in the future, we're going to be able to get into that and kind of reveal the fruits of that labor. I'm really excited about that.
All right. Thank you very much. Looking forward to you asking that question again in the future where we can give you some cool stuff. LP Fishtails asks, got another question. I feel a lot of StarCraft 2's problem was because of the ability to move your entire army at once, so a lot of players fall into the trap of just deathballing their army. I did see the video about formations, and I really enjoy that feature, but I was curious if you were doing anything to limit moving your army and forgetting about it.
Oh yeah. So I want to tag team this with you because you're the UX guy for this. So I'd like to talk about unit design a bit, and then pass it over to like how this is like how you handle this from a UX UI perspective.
Yeah, I agree. Go.
So philosophically, we want to make this game accessible, and people generally will feel safer with large armies. And without going into that, the key thing is providing, again, skilled players options to go, no, this is not going to be a strategy that is rewarded against a skilled opponent. We're still a little early, so we're just getting in the first area positioning units that are really hard, and we are missing really important stuff like static defense. But we want it to be very feasible for players to hold against large armies with relatively little supply invested or resources invested, and make it very cost ineffective to just ram through with a giant bunch of dudes. We accomplish this with strong units like the Absolver that can just you put up 3 Absolver behind a wall. How many Sipari can they kill? How many Dervish can they kill just because of how pathing and range works? Tom?
Yeah, not sure about exact numbers, but as far as I think one of the biggest thing for me out of all the different things that prevent deathballing, the biggest thing is actually the economy.
Yeah.
The way that we have our maps and our economy set up, players are really, really encouraged to expand and to spread out. And that spread outness naturally creates the advantage for not deathballing, right? So we want to approach this problem from not from a how do we stop people from deathballing, but how do we present options for people to do multitasking? How do we present that as a value add? How do we present that as something that's going to help you win more games and work your way up? So it's more positively framed than negatively framed. And so it's very subtle, but the economy is really what does it, and the map design is really what does it. It spreads you out. It forces you to get more and more and more expansions. And as that happens, if you end up deathballing, you're going to be at a disadvantage. And you know what? If you want a deathball, if you never want to use a control group in your entire time in Immortal, that's great. Do that. You're going to have a wonderful time deathballing in whatever MMR the deathball area ends up being. And that's great. Like every different stage of player development on skill is going to look a little bit different. So the meta at Silver League looks different than the meta at Platinum, looks different than than Diamond and all the way up to Pro. It's going to change and it's going to be different. And we very much want to encourage people to enjoy the game they want to enjoy it, while giving this sort of, hey, do you want to win more? If you do, here's this cool thing that you can do. You'll have to practice. It'll be tough, but you'll win more games. And so that's kind of the way we're framing that. That was a great question. Thank you so much, LP Fishtails, for the question. Man, we are at an hour 40 right now, guys. I just want to take an energy check, temperature check. Would you like to maybe take 3 more questions to be wrapped up, or you guys feel awesome and you want to go like another 20 minutes? Or how do you feel? How are we doing? We will be back, by the way, next month, guys, and we are on the Discord server all the time. So if we don't get to your question today, we'll most certainly get to it on the Discord server or next month when we have another one of these Making Immortal streams.
Yeah, I'm good for a few more questions. I'm good with either. Kind of depends on how interested y'all are and the community is.
Yeah. How do you feel, Big John?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm here for it. As long as there's questions to answer, I'm here for answering them.
Hell yeah.
Cool. Bifflestein is a good one.
All right. How different, Bifflestein asks, will each faction's tech tree be? Will they all follow the infantry, mech, air formula?
They will not. So we just recently, in the last, I think, 6 weeks, finally implemented our first primitive tech trees just within the Unreal Engine and making it all work well. So what you guys are seeing is just a tiny, tiny percentage of what we have planned and what we've tested extensively. There are going to be radically different tech trees over the course of Immortal's lifespan. And they will work in different ways. They're not going to be exact analogs to something like, say, StarCraft 2, but it's really important for creating and facilitating interesting build orders that feel distinct from one another. One of the cool things about Aru is they kind of have a Protoss style, like Trident tech tree, but it's lopsided in certain ways. So there are certain timings they can hit in terms of like getting air units out, or like high tier assassin or Templar-esque units like the Bloodbound, or in Zol's case, the Whitewood Reaper out faster than another faction might. And that's really good for differentiating their personality and playstyle from a faction that's more, let's say, stable, like Karath, a very stable kind of standard tech tree. So yes, it's something that we absolutely plan to do. And man, Hairlush is going to be a treat for you. You're going to like it.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Bifflestein, for the question. Nothing can contain the creative madness of these two lads, except maybe a button budget. We'll see. Next question. Alcarak the Mage asks, a mage. So, will there be more info on the factions on the website? It's kind of bland right now. Strong agree. There will absolutely be more and more. The website is a bit a bit naked at the moment, but we've got that structure there. And as we develop our art and our factions, and we continue to write more articles about our design philosophy and the history of strategy gaming, it'll get filled out more and more and more. This is sort of just the beginning stages of things. So thank you for remaining patient as you gobble up all of the information out of the game and run out. We are trying to get you more information that you can possibly ever consume, so that way you will have as much as you like. Thank you so much for the question. Let's see. Question that just popped up from Guzaman. Can Grandmaster be called immortal? That could be cool, like being so good that you become an immortal itself. Possibly.
We'll put that in the suggestion jar.
Yeah, names are very interesting space, and they always kind of, the fun thing I've sort of learned about naming is that they always exist in this sort of spectrum of like, how utilitarian is it, how easy is it to understand, and how like sort of flavorful and fun and thematic it is. And getting the names into a good place for everything, figuring out how much utility to put into the name and how much of the flavor to put into the name is very much it's a fun little balancing act. So we'll be playing that with this suggestion, certainly. Thank you for the idea there. Is the ranking new question from Psycho Spammer, is the ranking system going to be an MMR system similar to StarCraft? Will the MMR be hidden or shown? We're a little bit early to say for sure exactly how we're going to organize it. There's a lot of ways that it could be done. I think that for me, one of the things that I'm really looking at as we're designing or making our decisions about the ranking system, which is a little bit in the future, is sort of high-level players and low-level players have different needs and wants when it comes to the ranking system. So something that I've been exploring a lot is really finding a way to give the low-level players a very sort of clear, clean, straightforward way of understanding if they're progressing or not in the ladder without too much specificity or too many unnecessary details. And then at the high level, just giving as much raw data, that's what the people want. Just give me my 4 digits, let me know what they are, and I will compare them to the 4 digits of the other lads. So definitely want to find some creative ways to make things work for both types of players there, and maybe discover some more types. So yeah, thank you very much, Psycho Spammer, for the UX question. Woohoo! White X Cat asks, how do you feel about spell interaction that leads to cooldown resets for meeting a specific interaction, i.e. Katarina in League of Legends? Or maybe giving mana back.
Yeah, laughs in Mala. So yeah, this is something we absolutely will be. This is design space that we are planning on exploiting pretty heavily. I'll give you an example in terms of refunding mana or playing around with casting, like the delicate, like balance element. Immortals, and specifically their ultimates, just let you do crazy things. Mala has an ultimate that's Blood Rain, where she literally tears open the sky to the realm of Lakulathon, and basically these torrents of blood just shower the battlefield, and that and it's like supercharged blood from Lakulathon, and it supercharges your casting regeneration, not just for you, but for your ally. So all of a sudden, it's basically only relegated by cooldowns for the duration of the ult, and it lasts something like 10 or 15 seconds. So you can just blanket an entire area in just death. It's going to be great.
If I could sum up Dylan's design style in 2 words, it would be gameplay interaction. Because he is such a avid both card game player and designer. Dylan and all of the SunSpear design team, we love introducing potential gameplay interactions that really kind of shift the meta, quote unquote, and also allow for new areas of exploring interactions between the factions, both as enemies and teammates. So there's you're going to see all kinds of stuff come out of different factions and the interactions that happen there.
All right, so we are going to take now our last question before we answer it. I want to thank everyone for coming and hanging out with us. It's been wonderful. We're going to be doing these once a month. And so, store up your questions, start thinking about all that type of stuff. And if you have some questions that did not get answered during the stream, please go over to our Discord and ask them. We've got a special channel called Dev Q&A, where we, the devs, will answer the question. We will get to it as soon as we possibly can. Lots of questions in there. Elsewhere on the server, you will be able to get the pretty much the correct answer. I would say like 99% of the time from people that are just on the server and have already asked those questions before. So if you want a fast answer, just throw it in general. But if you want a 100% sure you're right up to date with the devs and what they're thinking, go ahead and drop it in Dev Q&A.
Real quick, also, sorry, I just wanted to say, I'll correct the mage. Only one a month. That's sad. Listen, guys, you should come check out our Friday streams.
Mm-hmm.
It's so wild.
We have them every Friday, and we usually have, I guess, like 20 people show up, and yeah, just come hang out. We could use, all of your questions. It's much more casual than this, and we're just kind of like drawing and having a good time. So come hang out on the Friday streams, 4 p.m. Pacific, on this same Twitch channel, and you can also ask questions there, suggest stuff, and I really appreciate everyone being here. So excited to share more stuff with you guys.
All right, the mage said it was sarcastic, but okay. Yeah, that's right. We're giving you even more.
We're giving even
one a
more.
week, and one a month, and all kinds of other stuff. Thank you so much, everyone. We are on to our last question. How do you plan on making the Pyre Camps work? How will you distinguish them from each other? What is the lore behind them? Sneaking in 3 questions is the last question. Inch. Okay. All right. I see you.
We can do that. I'll hit the lore. I can just handle this. So Pyre Camps, much like the resource nodes for Alloy and Ether, these are leftovers of the sort of deep past of the setting. A lot of this is going to have to do with the Elders' War between the Ancient Ray and the Nazra, which were the 2 sort of superpowers of Shale and Nuoth, respectively. And so a lot of this stuff is like the apparatuses that they left behind, but often it can be from something even far older or something more like metaphysical and geological in nature. There's a ton of different design elements that come from basically capturing these points and securing them with like factories to extract that and process that pyre. It can be slaying ancient beasts that have or ancient guardians from the Elders' War or before. There's so many different ways that we can visualize this and also have distinct gameplay patterns. There can be easy Pyre Camps, there can be really tough Pyre Camps, there can be capture points and several different variants within. All those are currently planned for testing and exploit and playing. Each ones have different advantages and disadvantages. There will be ones that are unique to be PvE as well in co-op. We'll show more, I'm sure, over the next year. It's something that we're keeping very utilitarian right now for the sake of testing. We don't want to sink a ton of art resources when we could be just building out another faction. This is actually an area where we're pretty open, and we want to actually work very closely with our map making community to make sure that we're making the best possible content for the best possible gameplay.
Thank you so much for the question, Inch. Also, Inch, thanks for hanging out on our stream. We see you. We appreciate you. All right. It's been a wonderful almost 2 hours of answering your questions and hanging out. Hope you've enjoyed getting to know the Aru a bit better. Please go ahead and follow us on all of your social media, either Gates of Pyre or SunSpear Games, depending. And yeah, we'll see you. Hopefully we'll see you next week at the art stream on Friday. Have a good one.
Thanks, guys.